Welcome to Inside the Issues. My name is Amrit Singh. Tonight, the conflict in the Middle East is spreading throughout that region. It started over the weekend with a joint Israeli and U.S. operation which killed Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei and several other senior leaders in the hierarchy as well. That conflict also has repercussions 7,500 miles away from Iran, here in California, home to some 400,000 Iranians, according to Politico. About 150,000 Iranian-born Americans live in West LA, in an area that's become known as Tehrangeles, representing more than 1/3 of all Iranians in the entire country of the United States. In the hours following the strikes in Iran, many in that neighborhood celebrated the killing of the Supreme Leader. But today, Governor Gavin Newsom criticized the ongoing operation and also President Donald Trump.
We've had conversations over the last few days that we didn't have to have prior days as it relates to emergency preparedness and planning and the unintended consequences, the uncertainty that Donald Trump has unleashed around the world. 4 service members died today, and Donald Trump spent more time talking about his ballroom than he did about the loss of those lives. Review the tape. Spend more time talking about the curtains and his ballroom than he did the 4 service members that died because of his operation.
The U.S. government has confirmed the number of casualties of U.S. military has increased in that time since Governor Newsom spoke. The governor also said that the operation will cause a spike in gas prices and will worsen, quote, the affordability crisis. Meanwhile, local Republican members of Congress disagree with Governor Newsom. That includes Riverside County Congressmember Ken Calvert, who chairs the House Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. We asked him about the war today.
I don't think anybody regrets the passing of the Supreme Leader in Iran. And the people of Iran, I think, are looking forward to having freedom, something that they haven't experienced in many, many years.
Well, we did see, as mentioned, those celebrations in West LA, but also anti-war movements are taking shape in the streets of Los Angeles. We go now to Anna Albarian live at City Hall, where protesters are gathering. Anna, tell us about the sentiment on the streets there today and what you're seeing take place.
Amrit, good evening. That's right. I'm here outside City Hall in downtown Los Angeles, where demonstrators are here standing against the war in Iran. This demonstration here is organized by a group called Answer Coalition. And I'll step out of the way so you can see right now as they hold up, well, as this bus passes by, you'll see they're holding up signs. They have banners saying no war on Iran. And the crowd here actually grew considerably since this demonstration started at 6 o'clock. This is the 3rd day of protests here in Los Angeles. Much larger crowds gathered here Saturday in downtown Los Angeles following this dramatic weekend, a very controversial weekend, as the U.S. in a joint operation with Israel launched strikes with Iran, killing their Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Now, as you mentioned, Amrit, demonstrators tonight and on Saturday are staunchly against a U.S.-backed regime change, and they don't want the American military getting involved or launching another war in the Middle East and around that region. They don't want escalating violence. They don't want a war to widen in that area. But the attack is drawing sharply mixed reaction here in Los Angeles. In Westwood on Sunday, a very different reaction. The crowds there were mostly made up of Iranian Americans living here in SoCal, the largest population of Iranian Americans here outside of the country. And they were celebrating, waving flags, dancing, and celebrating the fall of the Supreme Leader. Now, an interesting point to note here at the demonstration here today, I got the perspective of an Iranian American who says even though she's Persian, she stands against war in Iran. Here's what she had to say about U.S. involvement.
What happens in Iran is between the Iranian people in that country and their government, and the U.S. is no moral authority. We have bloodshed in our streets here, not only with the ICE raids and ongoing police brutality, but people not even having access to health care. How many deaths and murders does that lead to? Because people can't even access health care. So the U.S. has no right to say anything about Iran's government, and the U.S. government needs to stay out of it, period.
Now, Amrit, just a few of the voices here in Los Angeles reacting to a much larger geopolitical situation going on. And as you can see, there is sharply mixed reaction. Now, Answer Coalition, the group that's organizing this protest today, says they held demonstrations all across the country, including in major cities like New York and San Francisco. Protests are sure to continue all week long. Amrit?
And it's going to be very interesting to see the way this all plays out. The administration, of course, has not said that they were going in because they had issues with the theocracy's treatment of its people per se, but about the fact that there may have been a preemptive strike by Iran if attacked by Israel. And we'll talk more about that later in the show. It's so interesting to hear the perspective from the street. Anna Al-Barian bringing us that reporting and talking about what we've been seeing there in West LA and in downtown LA tonight. Now, the battle over voter ID could be heading to a statewide vote. A proposed ballot measure would require voters to show identification at the polls. Organizers are saying they've collected more than 1.3 million signatures across all 58 counties in California. That would be more than enough to qualify for the November ballot. Joe Kwan has a story.
Boxes full of signatures in support of a voter ID initiative that organizers say they hope will get on California's November ballot. State Senator Tony Strickland says volunteers have helped gather more than enough signatures to do that.
Just a little over 800,000 to qualify. We got 1.3 million just to make sure we did qualify.
The signatures on the petitions will be turned into the Registrar of Voters here in Riverside County to be verified. The Republican senator says the initiative would require
that you have to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote, to register. Then in order to vote, you have to show your ID.
If you vote by mail,
you have to show your 4 digits of any one of 7 different documents that say you are who you say you are.
All 58 counties would also be required to audit their election system every 2 years.
People have a thirst for voter integrity, and Democrats, Independents, and Republicans have come out in large numbers to support this.
League of Women Voters of California's executive director, Jenny Farrell, opposes the voter ID initiative. She says it's unnecessary.
Our elections are already super safe. California voters are checked and ballots are protected at multiple stages throughout the process. And there is zero evidence of widespread voter impersonation or non-citizen voting that would justify adding these new strict ID requirements.
While data shows voter fraud is infrequent, a woman in Orange County was charged last year for registering this dog, her dog, Maya, to vote in the 2021 gubernatorial recall and 2022 primary. Farrell says this effort is not about election security.
It's about erecting new barriers that are going to have the unfortunate result of disenfranchising many Californian voters from exercising their fundamental right to vote.
You know, I find that ironic because you need an ID to almost do anything. You need an ID to get public assistance. You need an ID to get on a plane. You need an ID to get medicine. You need ID, a form of ID, for almost every part of your life.
A 2023 survey by the Brennan Center of Justice and others found 9% of U.S. citizens eligible to vote, or 21.3 million people, do not have proof of their citizenship, such as a passport or birth certificate, readily available. The effort has gone beyond California. During President Donald Trump's State of the Union speech last week, he mentioned the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or SAVE Act.
It's very simple. All voters must show voter ID.
House Republicans have passed the SAVE Act. It's currently in the Senate, where it faces an uphill battle. Farrell says
this initiative is voter suppression, pure and simple.
Strickland says requiring ID to vote is an added safeguard for elections.
People have to have faith in election outcome. Our democracy doesn't work if they don't.
If election officials verify at least 874,641 signatures, California voters will have the chance to decide on this issue in November.
Republican Congressmember Kevin Kiley announced he's running in California's redrawn 6th congressional district. That comes after the passage of Prop 50, which split up Kiley's current district in an effort to produce more Democratic members of Congress. The redrawn 6th district includes much of northern Sacramento County. In a post on X, Kiley acknowledged that seat is more Democratic-leaning and that it'll be a more challenging race overall. Well, coming up, we'll talk about the potential impact of the likely merger between Paramount and Warner Brothers, and also take a look at some of the other big stories in California politics, including Governor Gavin Newsom's most recent podcast appearance. Stay with us. The deal has been accepted. Now will it be approved? And one of the biggest entertainment industry mergers in years, Paramount and Warner Bros. Discovery signed a $110 billion deal that could make Paramount, Skydance, one of the largest media empires in the world, a highly leveraged one at that. To discuss the potential impact on Hollywood and beyond, let's bring in political expert, Inside the Issues contributor, Mo Kelly, a man of the people. Mo, it's great to have you here.
Good evening.
I say that because I know you're here in Southern California, in Hollywood, talking to people. What are people saying and feeling right now on the back of this merger proposed?
As a person who works in entertainment and has worked in entertainment for the past 30 years, whenever you see a big merger like this, you have to worry about redundancy, the amount of people who are going to invariably laid off despite the public accounts to the contrary. They're not going. We know that the Warner Brothers Discovery portion has massive debt that they're trying to unload as part of this deal. And part of doing that is unloading people. And that's what concerns me, and I know that concerns a lot of people, just as far as on the industry side. Now the consumer side is, there's this illusion of choice. Originally we had all these streaming services. You can go here, you can go there. You had discounts because they were fighting against each other. Now they're working together with each other under one roof.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the debt inside Warner Brothers Discovery, which is true, one of the reasons why I was on the block, but you didn't talk about all the debt that Paramount Skydance is taking out, and the loans and the contingent sorts of...
Just to make it happen.
Just to make it happen. So when you see what we call a leveraged buyout, an LBO like this, knowing that ultimately, you know, Paramount Skydance is like a $12 billion market cap. Now it's like $80, $90 billion of debt, because I said it's like a $108 billion deal. So how does that suggest the operations will run, given that some people say this is a horizontal merger, not a vertical one?
You have to think that you'll see all these titles under one app. We saw it with other mergers of streaming services. You'll have just one app. You'll just probably have one umbrella for all these things. And it's a function of whether you will be able to consume your media in the way that you're accustomed to consuming it.
Right. I mean, we talk about the fact that they have these two big streamers now, this Paramount Plus HBO Max. Wonder if there's going to be separate tiles, and then also the conversation about, you know, the theatrical releases, because Paramount's got its own studios. And just bring up the Netflix side of this real quick, because they were suggesting that they had a cleaner deal that didn't have this kind of debt structure, and that would have been a more vertical integration. How does Netflix come out, and how does Serrano's come out?
Well, you think of Netflix, and they have a much more robust subscriber base. We're talking about like 325 million or so. And they had, I would say, a lacking television portion in comparison to this. And you can talk about what Warner Brothers Discovery, they wanted to be able to make theirs more robust and more appealing. Netflix had the money, and I think Ted Sarandos made it very clear. It's like, it would have been nice to have Warner Brothers Discovery, but not at any price.
Yeah, and well, they're happy now because they drove up the price on the deal. And they're making their competitor spend more, a higher share price. I think they started at $19 a share with the first offer, ended at closed at $31. He likes that, and the Netflix stock also seems to be going in a positive direction. Talking about going in directions, you and I have been talking a bit about Governor Gavin Newsom and the 2028 presidential bid. That's all but confirmed at this point in many different ways, many different appearances. He just made another appearance on the Adam Friedlander Show. I mean, this is a podcast styled in Dick Cavett mold, stand-up comedian. He produced it out in New York, born in Santa Monica, and he had Governor Newsom on. He said, "Look, what would you say to somebody at like an Iowa State Fair who has some bad things to say about California?" Let's take a listen to that and have you respond how Governor Newsom did.
It's your fault. You let in busloads of hobos and illegals. This is a common perception. How do you address a person directly?
Well, I mean, we can talk about the fact we went from the 6th largest economy to the 4th largest economy. We can talk about the fact we went from 49 to 58 Fortune 500 headquartered companies, more than any other state in the nation. We can talk about having more scientists, engineers, more Nobel laureates, the finest system of higher education anywhere in the world. We could talk about the fact we're the center of innovation and entrepreneurialism with AI, with quantum, with robotics.
Okay, I'm a guy like in Dayton, Ohio. I don't know what any of that means. I just heard it's covered in poop and stuff. Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Why don't you just say? Why don't you say like, bro, it's mad nice?
And Newsom goes on to say, I should have just said, after Burning Man, come to California, which I don't know that necessarily a person in Dayton, Ohio would also be thinking. What did you hear there? How did Newsom take that question?
I appreciate the strategy. I understand going on these podcasts to make yourself more relatable and accessible. I didn't appreciate the execution of what he did. He got there and he's answering a question about what would you say to folks who are not familiar with California, who are suspicious of you. And he's sitting there in his suit as a politician would, and he gave this very convoluted, complex answer and showing why he can't relate to someone in Iowa. It's almost like he didn't do the homework before showing up for the test.
Yeah, well, it gives you a sense that there's, again, a long way to 2028, and you wonder how Governor Newsom is going to occupy a lot of these spaces, because he wants to be in spaces.
Yeah,
like
and I think that's a great strategy to have. But you also have a game plan that you have to execute when you're in that seat. And if you're trying to relate to people in Iowa, hopefully this is not the first time that someone has asked him or presented it to him, so he could have given a very simple answer It's like, look, if California was so bad, why are people still coming to this state? Why is it they're going to the beach? They're going to Disneyland. You can go water skiing. You can go skiing. You can go hang gliding all on the same day. It's the place where people want to be. Look at the cost of real estate.
Yeah, I just wonder how what Governor Newsom has taken from that moment. I think you laid out some really important points there. Before I let you go, we've been talking about the governor's race as well. And also, last time we checked in, according to Paul Mitchell, the data guru here in California for Democrats in particular, he says it's about 17% chance that Democrats are going to fracture the field to the point that it'll be 2 Republicans at the top. And today in the LA Times, Joe Skelton is saying Democrats really need to worry about this because it's a small likelihood, but they didn't take the warning in 2024 with Biden, they didn't take the warning in 2016 with Trump. What do you see happening here with the filing deadline coming up on Friday?
Sounds like the LA Times has been watching some of our conversations because we said exactly this. I said last time, 18% is not nothing. It is a very dangerous gamble. You don't have to gamble. The Democrats can control the situation so it doesn't end up with 2 Republicans in past the jungle primary. All they need to do is get out of their own way of their own personal political ambitions and come together as a party.
Yeah, so that means some of these Democrats have to get out.
Yes, they have to, and soon.
And before Friday, because if they're on the ballot, they're going to get votes. Even if they drop out after, they're going to get votes. It's going to be very interesting. Mo, thank you so much for breaking it all down. Great to have you.
Appreciate you.
All right, as always, Mo Kelly talking about California politics, talking about what we're seeing in Hollywood with that big merger that still needs regulatory approval, but is a big conversation for many here in Southern California and people like you who are streaming at home as well. More coming up. Stay with us. We'll be right back. As we talk about a lot on the show, California has a housing problem. Estimates vary, but according to at least one analysis, we need 3 million more housing units than we currently have across our state. With that in mind, there's a push to take unused commercial buildings and convert them into homes. Jamie Kennedy takes a look.
Andrea Martinez, manager of coffee shop Barrio in downtown Sacramento, says the shop reopened 2 years ago after closing during the pandemic, and business has been tough ever since.
That first year especially, it was dead. I mean, we had a lot of support from the community and from people who were regulars before we closed peak pandemic. So it was nice. I think their nostalgia brought them in. But other than that, it was really difficult.
Having moved to the state capital originally to study at Sacramento State University, another issue to working downtown is not being able to afford a place closer to work, a common problem, Andrea says.
The regulars that come in and live around this area, they were excited for this other building that was opening over here, thinking that they could potentially apply to live there. But the price is just outrageous, so it's not affordable and it's not accessible.
Struggling downtown economies and a shortage of affordable housing remain a constant focus for lawmakers statewide. 3 unused state-owned buildings in downtown Sacramento will be converted into a new Sac State campus, including affordable student housing, backed by a $50 million donation from Meta, Facebook's parent company, something Andrea says is badly needed.
I lived in hotels and that was an experience. Yeah, I couldn't find places and they wouldn't accept me, and it was really difficult. It was really difficult, and the school wasn't able to set me up either.
The governor has pushed for years to turn unused state buildings into housing, with several projects completed and others on the way. The city of Los Angeles is now taking a similar approach, allowing vacant office buildings to be converted into homes. Estimates of California's housing shortage ranges from 800,000 to 3 million units, according to analysis from housing nonprofits, Freddie Mac and consulting groups. While inventory has ticked up slightly over the past 2 years, buying even an entry-level home still doesn't make financial sense for many, says real estate economist Alex Bentz.
The big two, mortgage and property taxes, and compare that to rent on a similar unit. And since the pandemic, that's gone up in many places over 20%. Since the pandemic. In some places, it's over 3 times.
Many downtown areas have lost workers to remote options, and why turning empty office space into housing is seen as a way to help those economies. Andrea says, couple that with the cost to do business and living costs going up, she says at this time you have to have empathy across the board.
We understand that everything's going up and it's not always as affordable as we remembered or we'd like it to be.
And why she says she hopes more can be done to help everyone, from housing to be able to run a small business.
Today, the U.S. Supreme Court paused a California state law allowing schools to notify parents if their children identify as transgender. The court's 6 conservative justices sided with 2 Escondido school teachers who sued over the law. The court's 3 liberal justices dissented. The stay is not a final decision in the case. The court is expected to hear arguments at a later date. Today, Governor Gavin Newsom warned a few counties that he may pull millions of dollars of state funding if they don't ramp up implementation of his signature mental health program called Care Court. That program allows people to petition a court to help someone suffering from mental illness or substance abuse, forcing them into counseling and treatment. Newsom specifically called out 10 counties for not doing enough, including San Francisco, San Bernardino, Monterey, Orange, and yes, Los Angeles County as well. There's a big conversation about housing homelessness and also Prop 1 funding, which we can get into. But you see there, a look at San Francisco as we continue this conversation about what's happening abroad and how it factors here in the streets of Southern California and throughout the state of California as well. A look at beautiful San Francisco. We have much more news coming up after the break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Taking a look at the White House on this evening in which the United States and Israel are on day 3 after an attack upon Iran, a conversation about what defines war and what comes next. That is what we're doing tonight here on the show. Today, President Donald Trump said U.S. airstrikes on Iran would take 4 or 5 weeks, but could last for, quote, whatever it takes. The Pentagon said 6 U.S. service members have been killed so far. President Trump has said he would consider sending ground troops into Iran if necessary. That's a quote at the end. Iranian state media reports more than 500 people have been killed. Iran has attacked 8 other countries in the region thus far. Evan Kozlov has the latest from Washington, D.C.
This was our last best chance to strike.
President Donald Trump on Monday making his first public appearance since the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran on Saturday. In an operation that killed the country's supreme leader and many other top officials. The president saying on Monday that this operation will likely last weeks.
Right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that.
The president outlined 4 main objectives: targeting Iran's missile capabilities, quote, annihilating the country's navy, preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, and stopping the regime from funding regional proxies. The president did not call for regime change on Monday.
The hour of your freedom is at hand.
That's despite urging Iranians to, quote, take over your government in remarks on Saturday, shortly after the attacks began. U.S. and Israeli strikes have killed at least 550 people in Iran, according to an estimate by the country's Red Crescent Emergency Service. And the Iranian regime has responded by launching missiles and drone attacks targeting U.S. bases, Israel, and allies across the region. At a briefing Monday, Pentagon leaders said more loss of life from U.S. service members is possible as the attacks continue.
As the president warned, an effort of this scope will include casualties. War is hell, and always will be.
We understand the risks of this mission and the weight of the responsibility that we carry.
And a new front in the war has also opened in Lebanon, where the Iran-backed militia Hezbollah fired on Israel and Israel struck back. Lebanon's government reporting dozens of deaths.
And this war is also causing a spike in the global oil prices, which traded at the highest level in over 8 months. Iran is currently restricting access to the Strait of Hormuz. 1/5 of the global oil goes through this vital channel. Reporting here in Washington, I'm Evan Kozlov, Spectrum News.
And many parts are now in play, always seeking understanding in a moment like this. We're lucky to be joined for analysis and latest developments by Benjamin Rad, Senior Fellow at the UCLA Berkel School and Center for International Relations, also a lecturer at Global Studies at the UCLA School of Law. And Professor Rad, I know you've been in classes all day, and yet you're one of the most informed people we can imagine having on right now. So just give us a sense then of where we stand now, day 3, going into day 4 after those initial strikes, and also what history tells us about a moment like this.
Yeah, glad to be here with you, Amrit. Well, despite the decapitation efforts that began Saturday, that started the war, we still have the regime, or at least some remnants of it, intact. It has not yet collapsed. They're still demonstrating that they have the capability to strike back and throw everything they have at a broad range of targets, some of which don't make sense maybe to the outside observer, but at this point, trying to increase the pain threshold and make it costly for the U.S. and its allies to stay in this conflict, and maybe hopefully, from the Iranian side, bring it to an end soon. And that basically leaves us with a timetable that's now shifted. I think initially what might have been completed in an earlier stage, a few days, maybe a week, now can extend possibly 3-4 weeks. The president giving us a timeline of up to 5 weeks. I think that's maybe realistic as well. A lot of this depends on what is Iran's stockpile of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, these Shahed drones we've seen used to devastating effect. We don't know, and I think that's going to dictate a lot of where this goes.
And also trying to understand this, we're trying to understand our reasons for getting into what we can essentially call a war at this point. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was speaking to this a little bit, saying we've come across intel that suggests that Iran would attack the U.S. or Israel if anyone attacked them. And then he went on to say this.
And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed.
Essentially, we are going to war because Israel was going to attack Iran, and so we preemptively went in. What is the sense from the neighboring countries, the region, and the broader community of that rationale for the war?
Well, it does. I mean, that's an interesting phrasing that the secretary gave. It does make it seem that this, the decision by Israel to do so forced the American government's hand to respond, or at least to preemptively respond to any possible Iranian provocation. And I think what it does is, and we've seen conflicting reports in the last few weeks. On the one hand, we saw the Saudis pushing against a conflict with Iran. We saw Prime Minister Netanyahu, making the same request, pushing against any U.S. operation. And then also now, we heard in about a week before the conflict started that the Saudis were in fact in favor of a strike against Iran. I think what it demonstrates is that Iran remains, notwithstanding the war that started on Saturday, remains this destabilizing force, a destabilizing presence with the ability to bring about a range of headaches and problems for not just U.S. allies, but also for anybody in that region. And so from the perception of the Americans, this is a threat that, whether it's imminent as if it's happening tomorrow or imminent as if a few months down the line, it needs to be addressed. And now the region is bearing the consequences of that.
And bearing the consequences, and also bearing this sort of asymmetrical absorption of the resources involved. And I just wonder if you can give us a sense ultimately of that disparity. For instance, in Iran sending missiles at a certain cost and a certain length of time to produce a missile versus the intercepting technology in UAE. I saw some analysis that suggested, what they have in terms of interceptors cost far more. And UAE may not have a financial problem, but also it takes a long time to create that stockpile and manufacture those intercepting missiles. So just how long can this war of attrition going on, especially since Iran's strategy now is simply to send all these missiles out and wear down and deplete those intercepting reservoirs?
That's an excellent point. The data that I've seen says it's a 20-to-1 cost ratio. So, for example, if it cost $1 million for an Iranian ballistic missile to be manufactured and launched, it costs $20 million to create a interceptor that can knock it down. And even then you have, in the case of the UAE, a 93% success rate, which is remarkably high, but that 20-to-1 ratio cannot endure. And that's not just a cost issue, like you said, it's the manpower and the factories needed to produce these things. It takes a long time. So from Iran's perspective, this can turn into a war of attrition. Can it drag this out with these sort of sporadic strikes enough to really wear down everyone's will and physical resources? And that becomes the issue. So I think what we're seeing from the U.S., why we've seen the huge number of sorties and the operations by the Israelis, is to take out the missile depots, to take out the stockpiles, especially the underground facilities. That's why we saw the B-2s used, to use those bunker busters to hit those missiles that Iran is storing deep within mountainsides or beneath the ground, because they understand that time is on Iran's side in this case. If they drag this out, it becomes much more painful, much costlier for the U.S. and the Arab states and Israel.
And perhaps one of the reasons that President Trump put this 4 to 5 week timeline on, though he said that the U.S. is capable of going far longer. And again, it depends on how the United States has defined the objectives. And one of these essentially 4 objectives is to stop and prevent Iran from being a sponsor of regional terrorism and these proxy groups. How could the U.S. government achieve that objective other than complete regime change, and what is the leadership of Iran looking like right now, given that we know that the supreme leader is gone and also a few layers beneath, apparently?
So, we don't have visibility into essentially what's happening on behind the scenes. There's a constitutional mechanism for them to pick a new supreme leader. But again, this has really only been tested at a time when the previous supreme leader was alive and had designated a successor. So we don't have that option now. I mean, maybe Khamenei left plans for who he wanted to be next, but whoever it is, do they have the credibility? Do they have the legitimacy as a Shia cleric, which is a important factor here and one that the Constitution requires? And then, beyond that is, the question of how do you stop, to your question about stopping proxy groups. I mean, short of regime change, it's to basically completely choke off Iran's ability to bring in any revenue. And that means going after its oil refineries, the energy sector, completely shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. But in doing so, you are also then, it's collective punishment against the population. But that, in that sense, you're basically, preventing them from profiting in any way off of the oil that they managed to smuggle and transport out, and reducing what they're able to provide to their proxy groups. Because already flights that are carrying resources and ammunition and cash, those can be identified and shot down. But it's ships and cargo that they need to get out of the ports that can be stopped. That hasn't been done yet.
You're laying out a series of very difficult decisions that the United States government, in partnership with Israel, apparently, and perhaps others, will need to make in the days and hopefully just weeks to come. It'll be an interesting timeline. It'll be interesting to see it play it out. You'll be a very busy person, sought after for your advice and counsel. We really appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Thank you, Emery.
Always great to have you. That's Benjamin Rad, a scholar of this region, ultimately, and obviously someone who understands the moving parts to the extent possible. Some very difficult conversations yet to have with respect to that war effort. And more come up here on ITI. Stay with us. Last month marked 4 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That's also when President Vladimir Putin enlisted schools to help spread propaganda about the war. One teacher made an undercover film about his school's indoctrination drive. The title of the film is Mr. Nobody vs. Putin, and it's nominated for an Oscar.
Как давно мы стали маршировать в школе, не пойму. У нас что, теперь Североснак директор?
And before that indoctrination drive, that wasn't the sort of thing that was happening in that school. That voice that you hear also belongs to Pavel Pasha Telenkin, a teacher in a small Russian town who risked his life to make this film. Joining me now is David Bornstein, the co-director of Mr. Nobody Against Putin. David, thanks so much for joining us. Congratulations on this film. You won a BAFTA for it, and it's making a lot of waves, and it's a beautiful piece. So first of all, congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be speaking with you about it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's so interesting because you are a co-director, you are a filmmaker, but in this case, your co-director is someone who was making films in the sense that he was the videographer in this small town in Russia, and he winds up being your co-director in this film. Just talk about how you two connected to bring this work to us.
You know, basically, he responded to a casting call. So there was a casting call on the Russian internet looking for stories about how Russian workplaces had changed as a result of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And he sees that ad and he actually got really angry. He said, "Let me tell you how my job has changed. I've been turned into a propagandist. I've been turned into a tool of the state that's trying to turn institutions like schools into parts of this war effort that is probably going to be tearing Russia apart, as well as Ukraine." So he got angry and he responded to this, and we ended up talking to each other, and we started this kind of plan of filming undercover in his school for 2.5 years.
For him to be doing this, and just talk about the mechanism by which he's filming, because there's this casting call. He's operating to some degree undercover, but to some degree, obviously, people are seeing him film. So just reconcile that for us.
Yeah, so in the beginning, actually, I sent a camera person to go shoot him. But after some time, we realized that he was a fantastic director himself and that he really had something to say here. And also, he had the perfect cover because he already was the school videographer. It was his job to be in that school shooting everything. And so it was the perfect cover. He stayed there doing the job that he was supposed to be doing anyways, but at the same time, he was smuggling footage out and delivering the whole world a glimpse of what has been happening in Russia these last few years. And indeed, giving the whole world a glimpse into how authoritarianism takes over institutions one day at a time.
And I'm so happy people are getting a chance to see this image right here of Pasha Telenkin and the way in which you superimposed that handwritten sort of identifier to him and the ways in which you use music as well. I mean, the tonality of this film, it contains multitudes because ultimately it's a film about these kids and this school and this classroom and this teacher sort of, at least school staff and student relationship until February 22, when things suddenly changed. Talk about the ways in which you negotiated these various tones to bring forth the movie.
Well, it kind of mimics my own experience with the film. When I first met Pasha, he kind of came to me as something of an international whistleblower. He was within the Russian system and wanting to show us something about how it works. And so I thought that this film would be a very tense geopolitical thriller. And in many ways it was. But then once we started working together, he started sending me different types of footage. Footage of him and his class, footage of his favorite students doing art projects, making rap music videos. And it just wasn't the kind of footage that one would expect to see in a tense, geopolitical, hard-hitting documentary. Rather, it felt like it was from School of Rock or Mr. Holland's Opus or something like this. So it gave us the opportunity to create a really unique tone with this film. And I think that's what makes it so special.
Absolutely. I mean, it resonates because I think audiences around the world can at least identify something about the way that that school operates that reflects what we see in our schools here. I mean, ultimately, it's kids going to school. Things do change considerably, though, after February 22, when this directive comes from the Russian government to these schools to begin allowing the military to come in and instruct kids to, as you've shown, identify landmines. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but also to sort of march, as we were seeing, and other aspects of military life. I suppose, what do you see there that perhaps you're seeing in schooling in educational communities around the world as you've been showing the films?
So, I mean, what you're seeing in this film is Russian schools becoming part of the war effort. There's been more than 1 million casualties in the current war in Ukraine, and the vast majority of these casualties are coming from small towns like Karabakh, like what you see. I think what is really important in this film that is being shown is the fact that Putin is building a new generation that is committed to war and empire. There is no doubt about this. It's something that he is saying to the children of Russia every single day when you look at these propaganda classes that teachers like Pasha were mandated to give to the children of Russia.
Yeah, I mean, and the response then from what you're hearing from teachers, for instance, in the United States or around the world, I mean, what are the things that they're really holding on to when they're seeing this?
Well, in America, people are drawing comparisons between what they see in this film and what they're experiencing. Over the last year, we've been touring with this film all around America, and almost, not every single time, but many times, teachers come up to us after screenings and say, you know, I feel similar pressures to what Pasha faced in this. I don't feel like I am free to support the kids in my class. I don't feel like children have a space to learn unimpeded and to learn free from state ideology. People are concerned about similar issues. And so it's been really important for us to get this film out in America. And I think just more broadly, this film shows how delicate our institutions are. It's not that Russia was a perfect place in 2022, but Pasha's school still had a lot of space for kids to be themselves and learn in a free way. That completely went away in 2 years, and it was a reminder of how quickly we can lose our institutions, whether it's a school or a government or a workplace or anything. An institution is like a garden. It's something that you need to really take care of, or you just lose it.
Yeah, well, it is. a tone that you strike with this movie that really is thought-provoking. It's framing up a lot of these conversations on education, the youth, and of course what we're seeing there in Russia, the nature propagation institutions. And I should say it's nominated for an Oscar. So thank you so much for being on. Congratulations to you for all that movement, and best of luck as the award season rolls on.
Thank you so much. It was nice to speak with you.
Absolutely, and you as well. That is David Bornstein, the co-director of Mr. Nobody Against Putin, Oscar-nominated documentary which won the BAFTA, and obviously a huge conversation about what is happening not just in Russia but in education worldwide. More coming up in Inside the Issues. Stay with us. Today, a group of Democratic senators took to the floor in support of a war powers resolution, which would require congressional approval for more military strikes on Iran. California Senator Adam Schiff is one of the measure's authors. In his remarks, Schiff compared the attacks to the Iraq War.
Despite the president's bizarre claim they were 2 weeks away from having a bomb, there is no evidence to support such a baseless, intelligence-free claim. Nor is there evidence that the Iranians had developed a missile capability that could hit the United States. None. And to suggest such things brings painfully to mind the false claims, the overhype of intelligence that got us into the war in Iraq. Have we learned nothing?
Both the Senate and the House are set to vote on war powers measures this week. The Senate measure is bipartisan. It was co-authored with Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Inside the Issues. I want to thank Mo Kelly for coming on, talking a little bit about Hollywood and California gubernatorial politics. Thank you to David Bornstein, the director of Mr. Nobody Against Putin. And also, thank you for your trust and your time tonight. Thanks to Ben Rad for talking about the Iran war as well, something we'll continue to cover here on Spectrum News 1. See you tomorrow.